I'm Dan Belhassen, founder and CEO of Neovation Learning Solutions.
Dan, it's really nice to meet you. I really appreciate you taking the time. Let's get right into it. Could you please begin by briefly introducing yourself and the company you founded and the company you lead, Neovation?
Yeah, absolutely. Neovation Learning Solutions is a digital learning company. We help organizations develop strategies and implement solutions to basically help their people be smarter. And this could be in the form of training, it could be in the form of performance supports, and we provide both the software and the services to accomplish that.
Dan, you're based in Winnipeg and you're obviously a Canadian entrepreneur. So I'd like to know how you describe the entrepreneurship ecosystem in Canada and maybe what you see as its biggest strengths and similarly its biggest weaknesses.
It's a great question. Definitely one that could have a pretty big answer. But if I were to boil it down, I would say that our strength is we try harder. You know, we're the small cousin to some pretty big markets, and I think we punch above our weight. The weakness, and I'm sure that pretty much any CEO in Canada will say this, is that the funding, the maturity of the funding ecosystem for startups and scale-ups is certainly getting better, but it's not quite developed as much as some other markets.
On that funding note, you secured an investment from CBGF, the Canadian Business Growth Fund. What does that investment mean for Neovation, your company? And what do you see in terms of the next steps that it's going to allow your company to take?
The CBGF, that fund that they have and their approach is really remarkable because it allows companies such as ours that are sort of a large startup to be able to remain Canadian, to be able to still have control over our destiny. And we're using that funding in order to accelerate all the different parts of what we do, from marketing to sales, product development, and client success. Really, what we're looking to do is to continue on our path, but be able to grow a bit faster than we were before and provide even more value for our clients and more opportunities for our employees.
Well, you spoke about opportunities right now. If you look at the ed tech space, both in Canada, but in general, internationally, what opportunities do you see existing for Canadian companies and entrepreneurs within the space? And looking at the pandemic and its impact on education, what opportunities did it create and also challenges as well? How do you see the pandemic impacting education in Canada?
Good questions. So first of all, within the digital learning space, there's really the academic side, and then there's the corporate side. And our focus is on the corporate side. So if you're a competitor listening, I'm going to say there's no opportunity here. You should find another market to play in. But seriously, digital learning has just skyrocketed in the last couple of years for obvious reasons related to the pandemic. A lot of organizations had to find a way to move from what they were doing in terms of in-person training, in-person onboarding. They had to move to a digital way of delivering that, and the biggest recipient of that was video conferencing platforms like Zoom and others, because that's the absolutely easiest way to pivot a live event to basically a live event delivered digitally. But now what we're finding is organizations are taking the next step. They're saying, yeah, that's great. We've got now live training that we had to do and we did. But now we need to do something long term. And they're looking for different ways to package content for ongoing delivery, or they're looking for ways to be able to be a bit more efficient in their training delivery. And it's not just that, but delivering training is one piece of it. Another piece, some of the work that we do with a lot of our clients, is helping them figure out how to manage and encapsulate the knowledge within their employees. So if you've got somebody on a team who's been at a company for 20 years, I guarantee you there's tons of knowledge in their head that is going to completely evaporate. They retire or they leave and then move on to another job. So how do you make sure that your knowledge ecosystem within your organization is strong and you're able to retain that knowledge within the organization?
Let's shift gears a little bit, and I'd like to ask you about the entrepreneur's DNA. How would you describe it? What are the elements that you see within it? And also, what do you see as the top qualities of a successful entrepreneur? And if you can, do you think those are innate, or are they learned, or What's your perception in terms of how those develop in someone?
That's a great question, and I'm sure there can be some passionate debate about it. My personal experience is that being an entrepreneur is right in your DNA. I mean, it's something that it's a way that you assess the world. It's a way that you look at risk and reward. It's a way that you look at decision making. And an entrepreneur doesn't actually have to be a business owner, from my point of view, because there are some great entrepreneurs that are in jobs in companies, but they behave in an entrepreneurial way. So I think of it more as a mindset. So I would put it more into the DNA. It's in the innate category. Now that doesn't mean that every successful business is actually run by an entrepreneur. In fact, sometimes what makes somebody great at one stage of growing a company makes them really lousy at a different stage of the company. But that the entrepreneurship, I think, is more of a mindset about how one approaches opportunities and how one sees risks, more so than can be learned.
Dan, you lead a company that's growing quite rapidly. So I'd like to know from you what you think Canada as a whole should be doing to best support its entrepreneurs, its startups, its SMEs in terms of allowing them to scale their growth as quickly and efficiently as possible.
Oh, that's a great question. Canada's in a great position to be able to just 10x its entrepreneurial ecosystem and get so many more companies, large companies, world changing companies here on our shores. But we're in constant danger of those companies ending up down south. So there's some Canadian institutions like IRAP, which is super, super useful, great to help organizations develop new products and fund things that they otherwise would have difficulty funding, which is fantastic. We have the SR&ED program, which is good on paper, but in reality, it's a bit of a lottery because you never know what's going to be accepted, until perhaps a year after you make an investment, and that could really use an overhaul. And then the Business Development Bank is an institution that's gone from very, very entrepreneurial friendly organization to one that's kind of chock full of red tape that makes banks look nimble, which is very odd for a government institution that's really supposed to help the startup and scale up infrastructures. So I think that Canada needs to really look at the SR&ED program and the BDC and really look at how they can be retooled in order to be more modernized and really help promote the landscape. They are great tools. Those three tools would be ones that would be so important to make sure that our entrepreneurial ecosystem is strong and we have many new companies that are moving from startup to scale up every year. If we were a startup today, there'd be two areas that I think we could use a lot of support in. One of them is in IP, where things like even general knowledge about various types of intellectual property, from trademarks to patents, would be very useful. And the other one is online security, data privacy, meeting how to best meet the various regulations around the world, how to best meet the Canadian regulations, how to make sure that you position yourselves and your infrastructure to be able to support that. Those would be two areas that I think a startup today could really benefit from some outside guidance on, and would be great government programs to help support that.
I'd like to again bring you back to maybe when you were starting out as an entrepreneur, but also from the perspective of somebody who's gone through it and looking back. What advice would you give to young Canadian entrepreneurs who are looking to launch a company? What would be the top three that you would say they really have to nail or focus on?
Really, it's the old adage is, as an entrepreneur, you need to never give up. But it's kind of a funny thing to say to somebody, because what it really is never give up unless you need to pivot, in which case pivot, but always pivot in a way that's going to be better than what you were doing before. So I always feel funny giving somebody that advice. It's true, but it's also kind of impossible to know what it means for an organization. But there are so many points where you could give up, and knowing the difference between we need to retool what we're doing but stay on the same road versus we need to move in a different direction is impossible for somebody outside to really advise you on. But what you need to do is you need to talk to everybody you can. Everybody's got a piece of wisdom. Everybody's got a piece of advice. Talk to your customers, talk to your team, talk to advisors, rope in advisors, get mentors, talk to everybody, ask everybody questions. And if you can do that, and the third thing would be put your ego on a shelf. It's not about you. You think it's about you because you're the CEO and you're leading the organization, but it's not about you, right? You're not actually the most important piece on the board. You have to make everybody else more important than you in order to be successful.